Good afternoon and welcome to this latest city profile for green infrastructure and sustainable cities. In this profile we're going to talk about New York and the way in which the city, its mayor and its government have been working to try and provide the city with a great level of resilience to climate change and extreme events, and the way in which green infrastructure is used to try and mitigate sort of more local issues about access to green space, around flood mitigation and around urban biodiversity. We'll also take a look at how GI is being used as an economic driver in the city and how that actually has impacted on the issues of equitability. So again, if we think about the way in which cities use issues of scale and size and boundaries, New York, made up of 5 different boroughs, Manhattan being the one that everyone probably knows, is very spatially diverse, very urbanized, very dense, but also has a remnant history and a legacy of large parks and large green infrastructure, some of which were developed and designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who we've talked about before, and others are more recent. But what we are seeing is a turnover of land in the city of New York, particularly around the coastline of Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan itself. And one of the ways in which New York is looking to increase its GI is by using those seafront areas for new promenades and new parks, or in one case in Brooklyn, new oyster fields. So something that you have to think about carefully in New York is this issue of, are we talking about green infrastructure at a city scale? Are we talking about green infrastructure at a site or a locational scale? And these two things, although they are talked about extensively in New York's GI plan, which is now 10 years old, are not necessarily applied in the same way. And they're applied in a set of diverse ways because of the nature of urban planning and land use in New York. A bit like when we talk about Shanghai, there's lots of different landholders and lots of very, very high quality and high value land. So why or how people are building GI is often very compromised in terms of how they might develop real estate. So there's a very strong economic aspect to land values and land use in New York, and that's why we're seeing the retrofitting of GI into former areas such as the High Line, or more green walls and green roofs and more biotechnology being used to try and integrate GI into the urban form. A second thing we also have to think about is the way in which the people in the city and across the boroughs are engaged with their GI and what GI they think is valuable. The image of New York is always Central Park, and it's always the place that everyone seems to congregate. But because of the density of the city, people use any green space they can to try and get outside, get some relaxation, get a bit of peace and quiet, or to sit in the sunshine. So there's some real tensions there between access and equitability and who can use what place and where, and the way in which GI is developed. And then of course we have to think about management, so who pays. So the city pays for quite a lot of things, stormwater management, but then is it down to individual residents? Is it down to individual sort of wards in the city? Is it down to environmental organisations to pay for things? And if so, how is that affecting the long-term use and viability and value of that landscape? So New York, like many places, has to contend with a number of issues around access, around who benefits and from what people can and can't use, whether or not GI is being developed in private spaces or whether it's a public asset, and of course reacting to stormwater management and to climate change itself. And there are a few examples of this across New York, and some of the most prominent ones are Bryant Park on the left, Central Park in the middle, and the High Line on the right. All are GI, all are forms of urban parks or urban linear parks, all do different things and have all been created in different ways. Central Park, very historic, the 1800s, Frederick Law Olmsted took that pastoral view and integrated countryside into urban areas with undulating landscapes, trees and water and different function. So there's a real focus here on functionality for people, but also functionality from an environmental and a water management perspective as well, with the Jackie Onassis Lake. And so Central Park offers something that's not necessarily unique, but is maybe one of the most high-profile examples of a multifunctional urban park that actually services a number of different populations at the same time. Bryant Park on the left, in contrast, is a very small park in comparison. It's located behind the Central Library, and it used to be an area that was pretty much a no-go location because of drug dealers, because of prostitution, because of violence. But they then took the view that the Bryant Park Conservancy wanted to open it up as a plaza and make it a place that people could go to at all times of day and night. And what they've really done here is that they've created a boundary against the main road on the far side, which goes up to Times Square, and a boundary to the library behind it, and made a relatively quiet and tranquil place in the centre of New York. They invested heavily in urban greening and management to make it almost quite a formal park, but there's still opportunities for it to afford different amenities to different people. So in the image here, you have lots of benches and chairs, and they are fully movable. You can move them all the way around the site, so people can choose to interact with that space as they see fit. There's also now a cafe and toilets and things like that. So it has become a location because of its amenity value. And in the winter, they cover the plaza and put an ice rink there. So this small park, which was historically deemed to be negative in terms of its social and cultural meanings, has been transformed over the last 20 or 30 years to become something which is far more prosperous and far more positive in terms of the city. And maybe along with Central Park, the biggest example of a positive investment in GI would be the High Line, to the picture on the right. Again, not necessarily the biggest park in the world, about a mile and a half long, elevated to that first story level, reusing a former rail yard sort of infrastructure, and has created a public-private space, with the park being owned privately and can be closed and open depending on things like weather, or in this case COVID-19. But what we have seen here is a new destination site being created, and part of that is because it's at that high level, so you get a bird's eye view of the city, and you're walking in between skyscrapers, so it's quite iconic. Partly it's because it's very high quality landscape architectural design, engineering, so you're on something which is well made, well kept because of the conservancy, and something which offers a chance to literally peek into windows of people's houses. And the benefit here is that it's now created a place that people want to spend time in, being outside, but also a negative in terms of it completely reconfigured the economy of the meatpacking area on the lower west side of Manhattan. So whilst GI can be very positive in terms of getting people outside, getting people excited about nature and being in parks, it can also be seen as a mechanism to change the economic status of an area. And so each of these three examples have been both very positive in terms of encouraging people to get outside, but they're not all positive all the time. And again, we have to think about this in the bigger picture. What is New York trying to do? What is it trying to sell? Is it a place where you're going there for the bright lights, or is it a place where you want a bit of tranquility and a bit of solitude? And that kind of fits into the Plan NYC, so the GI plan, where it is predominantly about stormwater and water management, but they are talking more frequently now about the use of innovative nature-based solutions around the use of GI and Pocket Park to really try and bolster the accessibility and the value at a local scale. So whilst you still have these destination sites, you then have a scalar set of locations that you can also go to, which are also positive for local communities. Okay, I hope that was helpful. There'll be some more coming soon, so take care.